Yeah, come on up.
Nah, it's across from you.
We had a launch party at my house about maybe 10 days ago. And would that be possible 10 days ago? No, it was more like whatever. It was a week ago Sunday. And at the launch party, they asked me to read it, and I read a little bit. And I guess I see this as an extension of the launch party. So let's party. We're gonna go and have Georgian food after. So everyone's welcome to join us. All right, so shall we start?
Yeah, let's do it.
I promise this won't be long. I'll read. We timed it, and it's about 12 to 14 minutes. How fast depending on how fast I read. But I'm not going to bore the crap out of you by reading for an hour and a half. It's going to be a few minutes. So, and what I want to do is give you a taste of the narrator, the main narrator's voice, who is Molly. And I think y'all know Molly's a dog, and we can talk later why Molly's a dog and why Molly's a dead dog, who's telling the story of a queer love story, basically. But I wanted to give you a sense of her voice. So I'll read 3 little passages. As a final straw, they buried me in this traffic circle under cover of night. The soil was in the jaws of December, though I'd been in a freeze of another kind for months already. They were able to pull it off because the panhandlers and druggies that usually track by, they and the V-cops who tail them, beg off that time of year. And yet the relocation didn't go without a hitch. Just when they figured things were going smoothly, an officer from the Parks Authority picked up their scent and issued a citation for illegal dumping. Nothing about him said, "Don't do this." Instead, it was more, "I got a quota to fill." But never mind, they carried on, ticket in hand, Ren and Jake with Donald colluding. They hemmed me in one of the flower beds of this roundabout, just across from the beds coiling the museum. That winter, I rattled with the semis passing by. I whiled away the time under that blinking eye overhead, the one that signals caution to the flow of cars breaking from God knows where to God knows where. The vehicle shot past the place I wanted to be, in the company of that ever-musing one on the museum steps, a thinker like me. Actually, that brazen nude, a thinker like me. I was there. It was there that Jake and I used to kill time when he should have been in school. The ground around me has softened now. The blanket with the chrysanthemum pattern that they wrapped me in has begun the process of decay. I sense the root of a daffodil breaking through, feeding off me. If Harry were here, he'd howl, "Stop your barking." But he isn't here. Not him, Flory, or Diana, nor Jake for sure. It's just Ren and Donald who pay their respects. They and the little one do their best to stop by somewhere in the vicinity. Jake, meanwhile, is in another state, one a mile high. That paradise he up and hightailed it to. His exit from me was an expectation of some kind. An expectoration is more like it. Hacking up, ridding himself of his life here, or running for running's sake. Granted, a death is a tough nut to unshell, but the important thing is what comes after, including basics like soil and water. It won't do to go looking for a better version elsewhere. I mean, demons follow you everywhere, to any soil or water, like the kind all around me. Unlike so much in life, they're uncancelable, like the memories that haunt me. I've heard April is the cruelest month, and it's true in a way. The rain drops down like tears, trapping fluorocarbons as they descend here in the forest city. But the sun shows through from time to time, making it a hybrid state that I inhabit. I'm attuned to the world it creates that's awash in bloom. In this year of the plague, the first of 2 in its time, and the one most people overlook, Jake considers himself lucky. Does he thank me now that he realizes finally that I had something to offer about staying alive most of all? Not just him, but the others too. They thought I was clueless, that I didn't see color, that I existed in a world of gray, as though that were a bad thing. I'd argue it's better than seeing things in black and white, or worse, seeing only color. Jake, with his newfound vision, allowing him to notice me finally, which I sense all the way here. Those moments when he spirits himself into town, I recognize his shoes as he jogs by, though they avoid darkening the ground where I am. It's such a change from the way he and I were tethered for so many years. That is until he ran off and unleashed the others on me. As if he lost faith in his own kind, beginning with his own family. God forbid it should be just the two of us, a long-awaited meeting of souls, S-O-U-L-S, or souls, S-O-L-E-S, as the case may be. Usually he spills from Donald and Wren's, faking ignorance of my presence as though that night December never took place. I know not only his tread, but those of the others, though he assumes I'm oblivious, a mere swelling in the ground, a place marker for what was, a memory interred, anything but myself, a thinker like him. I make nothing of it. I inhabit a different reality, tucked away from the pain and inertia, the weight loss and lesions in Jake's world. Run, Jake! What is there to recall me by anyway? A daffodil like any other. It too will drop. Toast it will turn. It'll peter out in the sun. A ring of daffodils. A wheel of light. A circle of bulbs beneath the earth, and me among them. If Jake can't find me, it's because they never bothered to leave a stone. I heard him tell Wren that the one he found just above, black and shiny and pooched at one end, the rock he pocketed unbeknownst to anyone, reminded him of me. To which I replied, your heart, my dear. No, there was no stone or cross sticks planted during that makeshift ritual. God forbid. He would have never stood for that, for cross sticks most of all, which by then he'd renounced entirely. When the clouds don't bathe me, they bless me. Cross sticks or, stone or no stone, cross sticks or no cross sticks. Objective time abandons me now. Objective time abandons me. Now, a thing that doesn't exist up there has assumed jurisdiction. Meanwhile, the grind of freezing and thawing dogs the soil. The rock below levitates upward, threatens to dislodge me, heaves into and irritates my side like a prod. The only relief I get is from words, from me of all people, the one they refused to believe capable of both language and thought when I was up there. On this rock, I read tales almost too raw to relate, about personages faceless as sparrows, yet not without countenance. Consequence too. The rock's untold tales and me, Molly, the two of us have taken up residence down here. We are too close for me to consider forgetting just below the surface, the story stone and me in drawn out conversation. Its shoulders threatens to dislocate me permanently to the land of silence if I don't speak. So I engage while I can, a mute with something to say. Never mind the mire and whatnot around me. No one sees or notices, but I recognize me. I spy this ancient erratic product of a world I never knew, modeled as a kildeer's egg. It's neither jade nor diamond. It's more a bone to console me, where they plot me down this rabbit hole. My only other consolation is I know I haunt Jake still. For him, my heart failed initially. I ranted about his rocky heart, stuck as I was in that electrofreeze, tossed among the other stiffs, and from well over 1,000 miles away, he heard. He came back. How could he possibly recognize me, I wondered at the time, with years and miles between us, not to mention a chain of events that held him after he reached the city of inversions, a mile high, stuffing a shoebox with cocktail napkins, drawn with phony names and numbers. I let it be known I was holding out for the whole enchilada, a proper visit and not a mere passing through. Not to mention an apology for having abandoned me the way he did. But when I whiffed my boy's circumstances up there, standing on a field of a different kind of passing than the one he fled here, that melted me. It caused me to realign my position regarding him and our past. We've come to terms, Jake and I, in mortality, if you will. On the prairies and mesas, or whatever they're called, just below the foothills where he lives, where they season piety with 3 shakes of fanaticism. They're a bunch of crazies out here, he declared, much more religious than back east. All the way in the forest cities, I feel the beat of the mariachis around him. I move with the pulse of the placita Tommy Strong. I sense the beat across 1,400 odd miles the way I never could back then. My gringo, what does he know about drum beats or heartbeats? Or any kind of beat, quite frankly, regarding Tommy most of all, the one he's got his eye on. The two of them check every food label they encounter, hot up vitamin and fat contents, he and Tommy both. The money he used to blow on the lottery, he now sinks into running shoes. He listens to Spanish conjugations on his cassette player, mows his nails over verb tenses, hidden sugar contents, and unnatural dyes. When he's visiting Ren, he avoids the solitude of what nature there is here as he jogs by. Is that what the Mile High City has taught you? He buys ever more cushioned sneakers with thicker soles to separate himself from the earth. He moved to a trailer park, he told Donald on a power run, fronted by a fiberglass cowboy, giant, free, and eternal. So that's the first part. And now I'm gonna, for anyone who's reading along, I'm gonna jump to page 237. And so Molly goes on to tell about 2, shall we say, failed relationships, 2 queer failed relationships, and they fail for different reasons, and we'll talk about that. But he's got, as we know, he's seeing Tommy now. This is his new beau, right? And so she has some advice for Tommy. And here's her advice. One thing the chagrin taught me, Tommy, as cliched as it sounds, is that nothing lasts forever. Neither cocksure belief, nor even an identity, given the way things shift. Being on the river taught me that there's no sense dreaming about a stable me when the flow of life alters it so much. I mean, a person's got to swim to keep up. Anything or anyone you point to as the finished thing is just yesterday's news. Like a body bobbing on a river, shy of the point it went in. There's a plenitude of Jakes out there, Molly's too. In all my life, I've never known Jake to be the way he is out here. And I'm sure you'll discover different ones as well, not just from year to year or decade to decade, but day to day. You'll have to make allowances. Then when you see each other morphing into something unrecognizable, figure out a way to go with it. Truth be told, I sense myself shifting even as I relate the story. The tail wags the dog, which is a koan to contemplate when you consider I'm history. The role I was relegated to was that of a soundboard, and now here I am sounding off. For these and other reasons, I feel you and all of us who've been slotted, subject to a name, limited to a singularity. I've heard people say it's inevitable, that kind of reduction, though I doubt it. So there's one, and then one more little paragraph and we're done. That's on page, although I'm enjoying this, I just don't want to bore the crap out of you. Whatever. This is on page 246 after the break. I would like to say that a work bred with good intentions lasts forever, though experience tells otherwise. Voices fail, as people do. Any graveyard, larger than this plot they planted me in, gives witness to the hordes who've been silenced, never to speak again. leaving what in their place? Marble, granite, sandstone, or wood, sometimes bare earth. I sense myself moving in that direction, feel my telltale wits giving in to the stone here, the one that continues to usurp my position, shouldering me from myself. It's nothing new to suggest. Thinkers have been saying it for some time, namely that in spinning my tale for you, Tommy, I'm spinning my own death, the real kind, and not the demise of the body, shifting me into another kind of body, as though this web of words were my undoing. And yet, although everything I say mortifies me, sets me, in a sense, in stone, I live still. Which is to say that if you or Jake or anyone fancies exhuming me, simply take to digging, unearthing where my heart once was, until you track down this rock here, the one I leave behind, a mass of lines. Just breathe into it and it'll spring to life. It'll be me and not me. Me as you fashioned me most of all. Okay.
So thanks everybody for coming. And thanks everybody online who is here. I can't really see because I forgot to put my glasses. That was one of the things that I want, because kind of look similar, and I thought because the glasses look the same. But yeah, I want to get up and get it. But there's going to be a couple of times like that because I can't really see.
I'll just interject this. When we travel, they don't ask if we're brothers. They know I'm too old for that. But they say, how many people they always say,
Yeah.
and they ask, are you this one? That's what they say. Anyway, go ahead.
So when I first read the book, even though I knew partially what the book was about, because I didn't want to reveal everything, I knew that the perspective was not human perspective. But when I was reading the book, especially at the beginning, what struck me was the clarity of the voice, of a non-human voice that was narrating the story. So what I'm curious, how was this voice of Molly developed?
Okay. Well, do you want the long story?
I want the long story.
Okay.
Molly.
Well, here's really what happened. I lived in Brooklyn. I mean, I lived here for 32 years in the city and in Brooklyn. And I taught at City University. And our friend had a cat, and she said, it died. Can you help me bury it? And so I know, don't tell anyone, the cops may come for me. But we buried it in a traffic circle in right outside Prospect Park. And so, yeah, don't tell anyone. Anyway, I know it doesn't work because technology never works.
The statute of limitations has passed. Okay.
We've been frozen in 2017.
Yeah. So we buried the thing. And then afterwards I thought, like of all the places to not want to be buried, it would be in that traffic circle outside of Prospect Park, which is the busiest traffic circle on the planet, other than like the one in Paris and Rome, right? Or maybe Beijing or something. Anyway, very busy traffic circle. And I got to thinking about what it was like to be down there for that animal. And so I wrote a short story. This was back in the 90s. I wrote a short story and I turned the cat into a person. And for the short story, and my friend said, we traded texts, and she goes, wow, you've never written a voice like that before, but you got to do something with that. And so then like life took over, and I was a teacher, and anyone knows about teaching, you never get a damn second to yourself. So lots of years went by until I retired. And then I dug up that short story and I began writing, and it became a dog. And it became a dog for this reason, because as a teacher, narrative voice is everything to you. And I was wanting to I wanted to really think about a narrative voice. This is I told you it's the long way around. And then I began to think about the function of a narrator, and narrators by their very definition are mutts, right? Because a narrator is a distillation of all these voices in the culture. So it by nature is a mutt. And also all narrators are zombies because, a book is a grave, right? This is a grave. It's dead. There's nothing here. But the minute you open the thing, like voices, they come to life, right? So they're dead. It's just dead matter, but then somehow they come alive for us. So I wanted to sort of capture like the way in which not just narrators, but all characters in the work of fiction are dead in a sense. And so all right, that's one. That's the first part of this answer. And then after that, my favorite text. So my favorite in the whole wide world is Moby Dick. And I spent a lot of time researching Melville and working on Melville and Whitman both. And I was especially interested in Melville's characterization of the whale. That led to me being a professor of posthumanist literature, which I developed over many years. And that's one part of it. And the other part is reading James Joyce's Ulysses. We know that there's a Molly at the end, right? But Molly only gets the last tiny little bit of the novel. And I thought, fuck it. My Molly is getting the whole goddamn novel. And so I wanted to mix all those different strains in one. So the hybrid notion of a narrator, the defunct notion of a narrator that comes to life, Molly from James Joyce, sort of wanting to give her a badass voice. She runs the damn show. You saw it. She's giving them all hell, right? Mm-hmm. And then Moby. You know, right. Moby. If Moby could talk, I wondered like, what would Moby say? And he would be probably trashing Ahab, number one, and then all the boats that come after them, right? All those ships that come after them. So that's all that.
Yeah. So yeah. We know each other really well, obviously, for people who don't know. We know what animals mean to us. Right. So in this conversation, I want to insert some of the words that I usually use for humans, insert them for animals. So one of those is gaze. And we do know about, women gaze and male gaze and queer gaze, and gay gaze and bear, as in hairy men gaze. But we don't know about animal gaze. So in this book, and there are going to be a couple of things that I do want to point here. Molly has a gaze. So she's not actively necessarily participating because she's no longer present. So you want to talk about animal gaze?
I would. And this also comes out of the course I taught in posthumanist lit. And a big part of that course was about animal sentience, but it was also Elizabeth Colbert's The Sixth Extinction. I don't know if anyone knows Elizabeth Colbert's Sixth Extinction. It's a fantastic book. And when you read that book, in every single time I taught the course and then that book, I designed the book to come to a particular place in the semester in which a student would always say, "Oh my God, Professor, we're the problem. Human beings are the problem. It's us." It was like, I mean, just thinking about it gives me goosebumps. It would happen every semester and it would be such a light bulb. Read The Sixth Extinction if you get a chance. And so I wanted to come up with a narrator that is tethered, because all of nature is tethered to us, right? We think of ourselves not as nature, but as separate from nature. And when you ask people like, what are your experiences in nature? They go, well, I haven't had time to get out of the city lately. And it's not as though this were nature, or that's nature, or like that nature. It's like someplace you got to go to find nature. And so I wanted to think about Molly as an allegory of all of nature that is tethered to us human beings. And the family is this doi sort of, how do I explain that family? I mean, the family is clueless, right? The family is totally clueless, and the dog is subject to all the stupidity of the family. And so I wanted to, and the cluelessness of the family, and I wanted Molly in a way to represent all of nature's gaze towards humans' bad behavior. I guess is one way to put it. I'm sorry if that sounds misanthropic, but that is what it was all about. Yeah.
So bottom line, even though we have animal narrator and animal gaze, the story is basically still about human condition. It is about differences and traumas and love and acceptance.
Right.
So in your view, and you said a little bit, but I want you to maybe talk about that a little bit more. How does this animal voice add to that story?
Oh, that's interesting. Gosh, that's okay. I know. I want to get there surprisingly the long way. That is to say that, well, I mean, I don't know if you have this question for me later, but I'll say, it. All right. So not to get too autobiographical, but, you know, I grew up queer at a time when it was not fashionable. And I know it's not fashionable in many circles still today, but it was fucking rough when I was a kid in white flight America. That really was MAGA America before it got its name. It was a hard life. That's all I gotta say. And one thing I know is, if it weren't for maybe one person in my life, I probably wouldn't be here today. Because I didn't have the sense of support that I really needed. It was really very hard. Can't even believe I'm sitting here today, to be quite honest, and being able to write about it, given how difficult it was. But Molly, who is, again, this allegorical voice, is watching the way human beings treat each other. And she's appalled that they're all the same species, and yet all I can say is they shit on each other, like in just horrific ways. Like it's not even imaginable how people treat each other, whether it's because you're queer, or you're a person of color, or you are a Muslim, or all the things we know, right? Like it's just amazing how we treat each other. And so for me, Molly's sole contribution is the fact that she is leashed to human culture. She sees how it bumbles around and how it makes, how people treat each other in such really horrific ways, and makes, I hope, as subtle but impactful a pitch as she could possibly make for embracing difference, embracing diversity, embracing each other, embracing not just humanity, but recognizing our connection to everything else on the planet. To me, that's her gift, right? As a
Almost like
narrator.
a commentator who is not of human species that can see things better than humans themselves.
I did not want another human being because the whole point is that we're incapable, you know. But of course, I'm a person putting it on a dog. So obviously, yeah. But so it's a problem, I know. But on the other hand, I still wanted to imagine a voice like if someone were not one of us, and someone were to live with a queer person in the most intimate way, who knows that queer person and who is tethered, literally tethered, because Jake and Molly are never apart, right? Until he up and leaves her high and dry. But I wanted to have someone know a queer person from early age, come up together, and then she, of course, is like she's maturing. How fast? Much time is it? 7 times faster than us? Is that how much? So she's already an adult, right? By the time he's 18 or 19 or 20, whatever it is. So yeah, I sort of wanted to have her mature voice, but having come up in the cradle, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
So since you already revealed that you're gay,
It slipped out.
before we start talking about this story as a queer love story, could you talk about the world in which characters live? So you're a queer person who lived in Ohio, Denver, New York. Can you just paint the world that existed at that time so we can place Jake in that place, and then we can talk about it.
I just broke out in a sweat. I swear, I have to have a drink, sorry. But this giant thing, why didn't I bring a big cooler? Well, yeah, that's a tough story. I'm not gonna ask you to say, could you repeat that again? But I want to make sure I understand. So you want to know like what it was like to be queer in the Rust Belt?
Yes. And then maybe
Yeah, I think my ears are hot.
New York.
Just recalling it's difficult, seriously difficult. And what's interesting to me after having taught queer literature for 30 some years is how nothing's out there about queer life in the Rust Belt. There's nothing. And I wanted to write, I'll just say this, I wanted to write the novel that I always wished I could have taught. Because queer life in the Rust Belt is not the same as queer life in Brooklyn. And it's not the same as queer life in California and anywhere on any coasts. It is a different world altogether. And huh? Except Florida now. Exactly. I mean,
Minus Miami.
we just had dinner with a colleague the other day, and he said, "Well, I grew up in Miami, so even though I'm straight, I was gay." You know, everyone's gay in Miami, right? Well, it wasn't true where I was. It was a pure terror. I mean, every cultural voice out there was about how wrong it was to be the way I was. The word queer back then was a weapon. It was definitely not what it is today. It's was not a descriptive term whatsoever. It was it really was something horrific, and then Denver was very different because Denver. I don't know why Denver is different. Anyone know anything about Denver? I lived there 8 years. I don't know why it was different, but it was sort of a hub for everything from Ohio to probably Utah. People came together, so it was sort of like an oasis there. And then New York is New York, as we know. I just I don't know how to say how difficult Ohio was. One thing I can tell you is that the river caught fire in my town. It just spontaneously combusted one summer. It's a factory town. My father was a factory worker. He died in that factory. Everyone was a factory worker. It was a city in which when I was young, the whites were fleeing the city like crazy because of their panic about the Great Migration. You know, people coming up, they came from Alabama to Cleveland when I was a young person. And they never once said, well, why don't we just all get along and we'll be neighbors, shall we? I'll make cookies for you. We'll have a party, a block party. There was none of that. They just wanted out. So it was, all the things we know, all the ists, racist, sexist, homophobic, I'll say heterosexist, however you want to put it. It was a tough world. Yeah. Really.
So we're slowly unveiling, I guess, the complexities of the story. So first we have animal as a narrator, animal gaze. Then I'm claiming
The royal we.
So then you are giving voice to Rust Belt queer folk.
Right.
But then you also don't make a clean cut between, these are the gays and all victimizing good. You are giving us a very complex variation of gay characters in your novel, Queer. Can you talk about that presentation that is a little bit more complex than just a clear cut good and bad?
Okay. Yeah. So when I was teaching queer lit, I had such a hard time finding literature, especially gay male literature, that did not play the good guy, bad guy. So straight people bad, gay people good, gay people victims, straight people oppressors. It was a lot like that in the beginning, especially not as much now, but in the beginning it was a lot of that, and that never sat well with me because I knew too many queer folk, and I know that they're as diverse as any other group, right? All groups are multiple. So really what I wanted to do. And when I was teaching, I would have this conversation with my students about why we feel a need to nail down the identity of a character in any one particular way, even as a male or female, even as straight or gay, whatever their skin color is. Why do we need to say all those things? Why can't we just give stories with personalities, maybe names, maybe not even names, maybe whatever. And so I wanted to not play the. I did not want all the characters to wear badges with their identity completely elaborated on the badge. So it's hard to tell actually who's what in the novel. In my mind, I know who's what. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to smack the reader. I sort of want the reader to decide for themselves, like who's who and who's what and what's what and so forth.
Like in real life.
Like in real life.
Somebody can read the book and say this person is good, this person is bad, but
Yeah.
somebody can feel them differently.
I'll add one more thing. My students were my teachers, and one of the things that there's one right there. You were my teachers, and one thing I can say is that they taught me to love indeterminacy and not needing to know that we don't need to slap people. We are allowed to just let them be people like that. Yeah, human.
So our Donald H. Mengay is a person who likes to break the rules, obviously, and you're slowly getting there. But he for whatever reason asked me to join him in this talk. Also another person who likes to break rules. So what I'm curious about, and I'm going to also be queer for people who didn't know. I want to read definition of queer because I don't know it, so I have to read it, and then we'll talk about that. And this is where I have to move it. Queer is defined as denoting or relating to a sexual or gender identity that does not correspond to established idea of sexuality and gender, especially heterosexual norms. So I think it's super fun to talk about definitions and kind of make them bigger or change them.
Which is also a kind of violence, right? Like even a definition is a kind of
Yeah,
violence
for sure.
in the way it limits, right? Go
Yeah.
ahead, sorry.
So I'm curious, in this post-humanistic fashion, would you also agree that this novel is queer because it goes against human-centric norms?
Oh, great question. And I happen to have an answer to that. One thing I want to ask is how long we have. I don't want to go over. Do we have a set time or what's your sense?
4:30 is our in time.
4:30.
3:45.
So we're still okay.
Yes.
All right, so we can chat for a little bit, maybe have questions if people want to ask questions. Okay, so I see queerness in part as a sexual identity, but which is like, but if it's a sexual identity by its very nature, it's about difference, right? It's just about like you can't even come up with enough letters for what queerness is, right? And then you got to add a plus after you come up with all those letters. That's how the quote unquote group, if we can even call it a group, that is how much queerness is about difference. And since this is a book about I think about diversity and embracing diversity of every single kind, ones that I think many people who read it might not even agree with. Anyway, since it's about diversity, I see queerness in the novel as a kind of allegory for difference generally. And one of the saddest things for me when I came out in the 70s was discovering that there is a gay male identity and there was a lesbian identity and there were these other identities, and there was actually animosity back then between these different identities. And I wondered how that was even possible to have animosity within this group that calls itself queer, and I understand it. And I know about gay men. I could go on about that for a long time. I happen to have a PhD in gay men, and the things that drive me crazy about gay men and the things I love about gay men, and especially white gay men and white Christian gay men, shall we say. I could go on about what drives me insane. But so I know that's a problem. But I also know at some point, well, it's about listening. If we're talking about difference, it means people need to listen. Right? It's about listening. It's about hearing people. It's about embracing, listening to people's different subject positions and figuring out a way to negotiate the chasms if they exist. Yeah.
So I don't know if this term already exists, but I just it came to me as you were talking about this. Is there such a thing as cultural queerness?
Ooh. Shall I ask? Is there such a thing as cultural queerness? You mean as opposed
So
like a cultural Catholic as opposed to a practicing Catholic?
sure.
Oh
And
yeah. Oh, I know.
and for example, hypothetically speaking, I am a straight guy. Fantasy. So I am Croatian, growing in Croatia, where I'm just part of the majority. Moving into the United States, where I am culturally queer, because I felt a sense of not belonging. As a straight guy, I can be culturally queer. Just something that I crossed my mind. That we can be, the definition of queerness can be expanded in that way.
Can I use another word? Ally.
Okay.
Like I see Molly as a queer ally. And not just a queer ally, but an ally to every subject position on the planet. And we know it's not 10 or 15, it's like in the millions or billions, right? So yeah, I think if to the degree that being an ally is about being a cultural whatever, but I know that you can get in trouble there too, because people can make claims about what they are that are very, very problematic. And we're talking yesterday about appropriating identities and really how obnoxious that is. And so long as you're avoiding any kind of appropriation, you can still, again, it's about listening and hopefully hearing people and what they struggle with and being a good ally. And I think Molly she's about the best listener and observer and an ally you could ever hope to have.
So it is a queer love story. Could you maybe put this book in the context of other literary work that directly or indirectly talk about queer love stories historically?
Okay, I hope I don't offend anyone when I say this, but yeah, it seems like the big, except for James Baldwin, who really set the stage, right? Queer male literature is mostly white queer male literature, and that never sat well with me, knowing the world I live in. And I did not want to tell yet another queer white story. I wanted to make sure that there's twins at the center of this novel, and the twins, the sister falls in love with an African American youth, and they get married, and the boy in the group of twins has two love affairs, and the first one is sort of like garden variety whiteness, and the second one he falls in love with the Native American, and yeah, I won't say what happens, but and then he ends up with Tommy, who is he's Mexican basically, and yeah. So and how do I have the right to say that? Well, my husband of 42 years is Mexican, and he is also Native American, and that does not give me the right, but it does. I know something. Right. I know a few things about life, and again, the point is not to say I know anything about those cultures, but to say I'm here to learn and listen those cultures and incorporate them in my life, which I've done over 42 years now. Go ahead.
So talking about the process
Uh-huh.
a little bit now, you started thinking about the novel 16 years ago,
I did.
in 2007. And it takes a lot of passion and interest in the topic to continue doing it for 60 years until it's completed and out in the world for people to read. Is there something more to what you were saying that fueled the desire for the book to go out,
Yeah.
and for people to read it? And I just want to remind you of something that you said, which is that this is the book that you would like to teach.
Right. Yeah.
So there has to be a connection. What makes this book the book that you wish that you had? What makes it different than other books in the genre?
Okay. So the first one would be a repeat of what I said before, which is that I know of no. If anyone knows of a book, please tell me about it. I'd love to discover it. I know of no queer novel that is about working class life in the way this novel is. I mean, if you get a tour of working class life in this novel and how not pretty it is, or how gritty life really is, and I don't know of another. And I would say that is my that was my number one motivation, because I grew up with all these queer people, and you find each other, right? Like if you're queer, you find each other in high school. I was in the art club, and it happened to be in an all boys Catholic school, which was super macho, and it was all about sports. We were in, and a lot of those lives ended tragically, and I know of a lot of other lives that have ended tragically in that part of the country. We know what happened to Matthew Shepard, right? And we know what happens to people. And I just felt really, 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 I don't know, like it was a fire burning in me to talk about what queer life is like in the working class. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't want to diss anybody. But I taught Michael Cunningham a million times. What is it? It's the flowers, not the flowers, the hours. The hours. I taught Michael Cunningham a million times. That's a very bourgeois novel, right? It's a very white bourgeois novel. It's a beautiful novel. It's written very beautifully, but whenever I go home and I see people back to Cleveland, it's not a book that would speak to any of those people. And I could go on the whole long list. I don't want to name names, but again, I love Michael Cunningham. Please don't say I'm trashing him, but it is not my world, and I wanted to be able to I wanted to reach that group. So all right.
So then, just the last would be about the actual process.
Oh, I see. Okay.
From conceptualizing the story to the finished product.
Okay, so that really was a process, because obviously a debut novel, you've never written a novel before. And that is a tough road to hoe. And it took me 16 years just to figure out what the process was for me. Everyone came up with all kinds of formulas, like write every day, write on weekends, write in the morning, write at nighttime, keep writing and don't look back, write 1 page a day. Like all the formulas out there that they would come up with. And I was a freaking teacher. I didn't have time for any of that. So I had to literally, like, maybe I would write one day and then I didn't get back to it for 3 months. And then maybe I would get enough energy to write for a whole week, or whatever. I know there were years that went by that I didn't write a single word. So I had to discover how to write a novel when consistency was not possible in my life. And that was a majorly difficult thing to do. Now I love it. Now I get to, raise a finger at all those people with all their formulas who say that you can't write a novel unless you do X, Y, or Z. And now I know, fuck that. You write what works for you. And what helped me the most was the damn pandemic, because little pieces here and there, little pieces here and there, little pieces here and there, and then the pandemic came along, and I thought, damn, this is my moment. This is when I finally get to when I get to do it, and then I think I finished the entire thing in whatever half a year once the pandemic came. Yeah, it was the first time in my life
Right.
where I did not have something that was interrupting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, no matter what we say about the pandemic, and here's the thing, I wrote a second one right after that. So the sequel's already written, and I wrote it immediately after the other one, and it took a year to do. Yeah. So the process, God, it so depends, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
So once the book was done,
Mhm.
did you have as a queer author? Did you have issues finding publicists?
Yeah, I sent it out 250 times. I got 250 rejection letters. And then I found out that that's nothing. That's a walk in the park. You can get 700 rejection letters. You can get 1,000 rejection letters, and that's totally normal. The guy, I forgot the guy's name. I even heard him in Santa Fe. He was in a conversation with George Martin, who lives in Santa Fe. And George Martin asked him the question about the rejection letters. He goes, oh yeah, I think my last count was something like 753. Oh, I know. It's like Black Panther and Red Dragon. Oh, Marlon, is it Marlon James? Who, you know that novel? Oh, it got awards, like crazy amount of awards. He had 750 rejection letters for that novel. So, so if you don't have diligence and if you are prone to discouragement, never write a damn novel. Because it's not, you really got to be tough, right, basically, right? And dogged in pursuing it. So yeah, 16 years of staying with it.
Yeah.
And now I'm a writer in search of an audience. I'm a writer in search of a readership. It's like I was telling him when I was in my 20s, I was a young queer kid in search of a husband. Got that done. He didn't like to travel, so then I was in search of a traveling friend. Got that done. I was in search of a publisher. Got that done. Now I just need a readership, and I'll be good to go. So that's my recent search.
Right.
Yeah.
On that note.
On that note. Okay, so yeah. Any questions or comments?
Did you work with an editor?
I did. I could have self-published, and we were talking about this yesterday, and I know there are editors out there. But the publisher that finally went with me, and I'm telling you, there's nothing in the world, nothing, after you've been trying for years to get your novel published, there is nothing as sweet as the day you get the letter saying, I'm pleased to tell you that we'd love to publish your novel. And the thing is, the thing that's nice about a press is they have in-house editors, and I worked with a woman named Ruth Thompson, and the good news was probably 5 years before then, I would have been a total asshole and said, but I realized you need to shut up and listen, right? So I had just read this giant book about the publishing of The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. And I don't know if you know this, but 2/3 of The Wasteland was cut out by what's the name? What's that famous poet? Oh my God. It'll come to me. Anyway, 2/3 of The Wasteland was cut out. Imagine that. So he ended up with 1/3 of what he had written initially. And when it was done, he said, it's 10 times better poem. And so Ruth was wonderful because she kept saying, like, she was diplomatic enough to say, you're in the driver's seat. I want you to know this is your novel. We love the novel. We're not going to destroy your novel. But could you possibly think about X, Y, and Z? And having just read that book about really seriously brutal editing process, the editor will come to me. He wrote, the Cantos. Who's the famous poet that wrote the Cantos? Ezra Pound. That's it. Ezra Pound was its editor. Thank you so much, Drew. Ezra Pound was his editor, and how do you argue with Ezra Pound, number one? And number two, I thought, just shut the fuck up and do whatever she tells you. So I told her, don't be diplomatic. Just tell me, like, you think this is not working or that's not working. And the novel is really better as a result of that process. The one thing I did tell her is all those dashes and comments and all that stuff, forget trying to change all that. Like, that's just how I write. So don't waste your time. But other than that, she helped. I mean, the first chapter is radically different than what it was just because of her input. So yeah, she was fantastic.
I have a question.
Sure.
How did you come up with the title?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I probably worked on the title for years. And I literally had a notebook just of title possibilities. There are literally hundreds of title possibilities there. And I wanted to think about the leash or the tether that she was tethered to them. And I also knew that this was the first in a trilogy. So I wanted to signal that it's an introduction, and a lead is an introduction, right? So the lead to our undoing is both the lead to, it's the introduction to the separation between Molly and Jay, but the third one takes place in Trump America. And exactly. So that's the real undoing. So the whole novel is the lead or the introduction to the world we live in today. And I'm just going to tell you, I could cry every day. We all can, right? Seeing what it's become, like the world we grew up in versus what it is now. It's a shit show, right? So the third one is, I'm writing it now. Oh God, it's so hard to read. What can I say? It's hard to write and it's hard to read because it takes place today, and it is so far. I mean, I'm thinking about this, and I'll have people tell me whether or not it's possible, but it's narrated by a trans man, and I just have so many trans folk in my life that I love so passionately, who have been such teachers to me, and it may not be right, but I love that voice. Actually, the daughter here ends up being a trans male. What's her name? Her name is Billy, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, her name is Billy, and Billy turns into Will ultimately, and Will is the daughter of Donald and Rand, and Will and Billy becomes just a badass trans man, and I love the voice. You'll all tell me whether it's appropriation. God, I hope it's not, but just knowing the people I do and having listened so long, I also, I'll say this, Toni Morrison said, don't write about what you know, write about what you don't know, right? And so I want very much to pursue that. Yeah. Okay, any other? Go ahead.
It's not a question, but I appreciate your reading in the beginning, because when I read it, the Molly's voice is different. It's more like, because your tone of voice, then now I can feel the compassion almost.
Really?
Molly.
Does it help?
Yes, because just reading is a little bit more, how can I say, ironical.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I mean, I
Interesting.
may be wrong, but
I think you're right, actually.
Yeah.
It's ironic, no doubt.
yeah, but because of your tone of the voice, it's becoming much more deeper and then kind of expanding.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, a couple things to say. Someone, surprisingly, someone asked me to do a podcast, and I did it. And I listened back and I thought, wow, this is like, I sound like a faggy Mickey Mouse in the podcast. Seriously, you got to listen to it. It's a laugh. He heard it. It's a laugh. It's on queer words. Just look me up on queer words, and I'm like a faggy Mickey Mouse. And so never mind. I'm gonna do an audiobook of this whole thing. And so if anyone wants to hear how I would read it, it'll be a faggy Mickey Mouse reading
It's Molly.
Thank you, Mama. But by the way, don't forget James Joyce, right? James Joyce, you gotta read aloud or you gotta hear aloud. It's no good if you just read James Joyce. It's audible. It all makes sense when it's audible. Yeah. So, Louise, were you gonna say?
Well, isn't Mickey Mouse a fag anyway?
He is a fag. He's a fag.
So why should he say-
5 minutes. I just need the ears and I'm all set to go. Yeah, that's true. That's so funny. Any other comments or questions? Brian?
So you said in writing your second book that it took you a year. So what was your process in the second book? And did you see the seeds of that process during the 16 years in which you struggled with the first?
Totally. Here's how the second one was different. I never looked back once I started writing. I did not go back and revise. The first one, I probably revised the first 10 pages 3,000 times. You know, I just couldn't even get anything out because I kept saying it's shit, it's shit, it's shit, it's shit. When the second one came around, I thought, I'm not saying any single word of shit. I just wrote. And I also, in that, because it was the pandemic, because I was retired, I wrote from 9 until 3 every single day. So I just, and the good news was because I realized, oh, I did this already. I wasn't worried. So, I mean, the first one is just all terror. It's just endless night terrors, every kind of terror, trying to get the damn thing down on paper. And self-editing is the worst part of doing the first novel. So the second one, I just realized, just write shit, just keep writing shit and keep writing shit. And it wasn't shit. I was like shocked to realize that it was okay, you know. So, but you have to accept that idea that you're writing shit, and that's okay.
Is it gonna be published?
Well, the publisher that this Saddle wrote, and I have to give them a shout out. Actually, I have to give several people a shout out. I have to give Donnie and Greg a big shout out. I have to give, wait, let me get it right. There's Bella, Ben, Juanita, and Drew a shout out. Did I get it right?
Yes.
I have to thank Michelle Carlsberg for arranging this. I have to thank all of you for going out when there was a danger of rain. Danger of rain, you know, in Santa Fe.
Bad.
Keep in mind, in Santa Fe, it hasn't rained like in 7 months. Not a drop, you know. So yeah. Anyway, and it is a danger, like, isn't it? It's just crazy what happened in Brooklyn yesterday. I'm just so glad I don't live in Brooklyn anymore. Anyway, the second book, the press told me, and I have to give them a shout out too. Saddle Road Press. You know, you gotta love people who say your novel's beautiful and they love it. I mean, how can you not love them? And they've been so helpful and they're so smart and they have been so kind and so supportive. And they already told me, don't worry, we'll publish your second novel. But we would like for you to, they said, try and get a more, what's the word? It's called well-heeled. Would it be called well-heeled? A richer, a more wealthy publisher who can promote it in ways we don't have the resources for. So that was their words to me. So I have that option of publishing with them if I want, or going elsewhere. So I'm sort of exploring possibilities. The second one is a wild one. It's like this. My husband, who hates reading, read this whole thing. You know, seriously, I think this is the only book he ever read in his entire life. Seriously, no joke.
That's love.
It is love, because it was every word, every page was painful. He said, when I got done, I said, well, what did you think of the sex scene? He goes, there is no sex in that novel. What are you talking about? And yeah, exactly. So then we went over some of the little passages and, you know, yeah, it's a little subtle, that's true, but it's there. But the second one is like, is there a page where sex is not happening in the second novel? I'm not sure. The point is, it's a celebration. The second one is really a celebration of queer identity. There's just no doubt about it. It is a pure celebration, and hopefully a tasteful one at that. So that's always the goal. Anyway, thanks for asking. Yeah, it's like this. It's so like this. It'll happen. And the third one, I mean, I think I could get shot for the third one. Because it's so out there. Yeah. Trashing America. I'm sorry, but it's trashing America.
But you're trashing Trump America.
I'm
That's
trashing.
okay.
Yeah.
You have half the country. to
Huh?
read it. You have half the country to read it.
No, you have the country. No, yeah, exactly. All right, any other comments or questions or ideas or anything? Anyone want to say anything? Okay, then I guess that's it.
That's it. Yay. Now let's buy and sign the book.
Oh, right here. Yeah.
It's so funny.
Oh, yeah,
There's an
maybe
internet
these
question
guys
there.
want to.
It's delayed, isn't it?
And it was funny, I looked at it at the screen once and you were going like that.